Good morning, everyone. Sarah McVicker back with you for video 6 of the series of 6, maybe more, that I have put together with my cousin Lighthouse Mary to hit upon some spots and topics and questions that I'll be covering in my workshop that I'll be teaching in the fall of 2020 in Halifax. The videos are now, 1 and 2 are now posted on YouTube. Video 3 will be posted on August 17th, and the rest will post 10 days consecutively after that until we finish, whenever that's going to be. I'm the creator of Trauma Talks on Facebook. I hope you're enjoying it. There seems to be a lot of people reading, and I'm hoping that there's all kinds of learning going on. And I'm also the author of a newly published book, What Made My Family Ill and Healing Through Self-Love, published in March of this year. All of the work I'm doing right now is as a result of this book. I'm expecting my cousin Lighthouse Mary to arrive.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Mary, you're here.
Yes, with more questions.
Okay, that's good. No
Are you ready
problem.
for more questions?
I am ready, always ready.
That's good. So in our last video, your adult years were upon you as a teacher,
Yes?
and you said that you began a life of box ticking. What were you referring to?
Yeah, that's my phrase, box ticking. It's my life felt like that. When a child is experiencing emotional trauma, Mary, there's no identification with love of self or anybody. If you can't find that in your family home, it's going to be hard to find it anywhere else. So those children learn to suppress emotions and feelings because they're not modeled for them. We don't recognize that in our family culture. We tamp them down so as not to sometimes get into trouble if we demonstrate these things. So we recognize the kinds of feelings and emotions that would be threatening, like fear or anger if someone is attacking you or hurting you in some way. There would be a feeling of fear. Also humiliation, because that feeling, all children are capable of feeling humiliation no matter what, because it's an emotional reaction to something that makes them feel
Yes.
less inside. So it's the ticking the boxes for me became a way of my covering the bases in my life, and it was something I interpreted even as a child as something that society expected and something that my family expected. And the way that I knew that was because all of my siblings went out and did the same things repeatedly, as did the people that we knew in society.
Yes.
So I just followed along,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
I can see why you would call it that then, checking things off.
Yes.
But what kinds of things were you checking off?
Oh, the big things. The ticking the boxes in my life were always for the big things that you saw everyone else doing. Like, for example, there'd be an expectation to finish school.
Sure.
There would be then an expectation, whether it was verbalized or not, doesn't matter. There'd be an expectation of finding a job after you get educated. Then for women anyway, there was the expectation of getting married, and of course that followed with having a family.
Sure.
So these expectations in my family were not verbal. Nobody was saying, oh, you have to do this. It was by example. You know, it's something that was in society, it was in my family, so I followed suit as something that I thought I was supposed to be doing. My mind is very ordered, was then and is now, and I think in terms of lists. So it was a natural way with my emotional life as undeveloped as it was a natural way for me to experience my intelligence was telling me what to do. That was my guide, not my emotional life at all.
I see.
Yeah.
As an adult, when did you become aware that things just weren't feeling right and things weren't going well?
Well, I kept trying to find myself everywhere. I was an avid reader all my life, and in particular in my 30s, that really took off in my early 30s. And of course the reason it took off was because I was constantly trying to find myself in books. And the kind of books that I was reading would be what we would call self-help books in those decades.
We've all read a few of those.
That's right, and they were kind of new in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So everybody was sort of getting into reading this, and of course they were very interesting to me, and I kept trying to find myself. And the frustration was kind of happening that the reality, I learned a lot of wonderful things about the body and the mind and spirituality and the ego versus spirit and religion and all of that. And I loved that. But what was frustrating about it was that none of it was making me feel like I had accomplished anything in my life. I still felt like a mess. I couldn't really find myself in there because my life was still so unhealthy with the excessive drinking and the sort of the constant stress, and it was just not feeling right. And the drinking excessively was continuing as well, so it was.
What did you try to do to improve the situation? Because you must have been just utterly baffled about it all.
Yeah, well, the reading continued because I'm kind of just a reader, and that would never end. So I continued to read different authors, different topics, everything I could get my hands on to do. I was even reading about alcoholism without ever recognizing anything about my own drinking as being a problem.
That's interesting,
really.
isn't it?
Yeah, but which showed that back in my mind, I was even questioning that as a young woman. But yes, the reading continued, but I realized because it wasn't really coming together for me in any kind of formation that was helpful at that time, I knew I had to take another step. And I was never afraid to go forward, as we were talking about in the last, there was always that drive forward to try to find the next best thing. So I started to investigate professional help in the form of psychologists first, and then a couple of psychiatrists. And
did that feel like a good road for you once it began?
Well, it felt good in that I was doing something rather than nothing.
Right.
It always made me feel good going forward. There was, if I was learning something, if I was finding something else out that might help me, then I felt like I was accomplishing something. So in that way, yes, it felt like I was doing something. But the reality of it after a while, because I did this for several years, I saw professionals for several years, and in so doing, I came to realize that they're not all trained the same way.
Right. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Sarah, because it's so important for people to realize that. I always hear of people that reach out for help, and for whatever reason, maybe the professional they're seeing, it isn't a good fit, so they don't go back.
Yes.
And when that happens, they continue reaching out for help.
Yeah, and that's, it can be sad if those people give up quickly, because
I think a lot do.
yeah, and that is sad, because I have found out that in the search for people that are a better fit, they are out there. For example, in my work and in my life, and constantly trying to find out what was going on, I learned eventually that there are people that are doing that work that are qualified in trauma treatment.
Yes.
And there's people that are qualified in addiction treatment, and all of those things that I didn't know in the early 90s.
Right.
So I was sort of just going through people and trying different people, and I did hit upon some excellent people
Yes.
in that time.
There was a big catalyst that came along when you felt at the end in so many ways.
Oh yeah, it was getting to be kind of tough.
Could-
Yeah.
Yes.
These things never, me like everybody else who is in some kind of crisis for decades, it's going to come to a pinnacle in one way or another. And unfortunately, that's true of every single one of us. There are no exceptions to that rule. We are going to get worse until we learn how to get better.
Right.
So the pinnacle for me, with the excessive drinking, that was even more so in the 90s than it was in university, much worse. So the pinnacle for me came, and it was in 2007, my marriage ended. In 2008, I left my country for almost 6 years. Unintended when I left. I didn't intend it
Right.
for it to be 6 years, but it turned out to be that. And the very next year, after I left my country, I arrived at rock bottom and was forced to accept the fact that I was alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, those are three of the hardest things that anyone could experience in their lifetime.
Yeah.
And they happen to you all at once.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Is this perhaps a good time to take a break, and we'll pick this up at another time?
Yes, it's a good time to take a break.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Mary.